Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today we're talking about the new album from Galantis, the Aviary. So, Galantis, this is going to be a special video for you guys. First of all, because I decided since Galantis was the first artist that I ever reviewed on this channel, I figured this should be a special review as well. So that's why I brought on fellow electronic music critic to talk about it with me, LandonRemixes. So without any further ado, let's get right into that. Alright, so I got LandonRemixes here with me today.
How's it going?
And today we're talking about this new Galantis album, the Aviary, and let's start with that. So your thoughts on the two guys in Galantis?
Yeah, obviously Galantis is a duo comprised of Style of Eye and Mike Snow's producer. That was kind of an interesting combination to see right in the beginning from the history of Galantis. I remembered how I first kind of got introduced to them as I think Cascade had done an edit of their song Smile.
Mm-hmm.
I was personally a big fan of that song and the first EP they kind of put out as Galantis. I thought it was kind of a light in the dark considering in 2013, 2014, a lot of the music we were getting was this kind of like simple 4-on-the-floor kick big room stuff, and then they kind of came in with this resurgence of this like piano house, having everything be like really melodic and everything. That's mainly what attracted me to them in the first place, and I thought they brought kind of an interesting flair, being from two totally like polar projects, being one in like kind of the indie rock vein and everything. What about you? How'd you get introduced to them?
Basically, I just found Galantis on the iTunes dance charts. They were #1 for a while, and
oh, yeah.
I picked them, as a lot of people know, for my very first review on the Wonky Angle. The idea behind it was to cover something, you know, relevant, but that I hadn't seen any of the other big reviewers I watched cover. So I just checked it out, and I thought it was fine. In retrospect, maybe not the best album to start with for first ever review, because there really is not much to say about Pharmacy. Granted, there is some interesting about it. Like, it's an album that I probably should hate, because like it's really cheesy and samey, and but especially samey, but somehow I enjoyed it. And that's really all there is to say about Pharmacy. Coming back to it now, it's maybe not as good as I remembered, but it's still not bad. And what were your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Pharmacy coming back to it?
I kind of have similar feelings when it comes to Pharmacy, because you know, back when I did the review on my channel, back when the album first dropped, I praised it a lot, and I think a lot of that is because the way I organized things was like ratings based on how many songs I thought were good on it, rather than like how I really soak in the project as a whole.
Right.
Within just a couple months of me listening to the album, I started feeling like sick every time I'd go in to listen to it. Like, there's such a formula to every single song.
Right.
Like vocal build up, drop, vocal build up, drop, and it's all kind of the same style.
Exactly,
too.
yeah.
So obviously, like, I do appreciate what Galantis was doing on the album in general with their formula, but after like hearing that over and over and over again, it's like, how long am I going to be able to stand this right now? And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I haven't gone back and dived into the album for quite a long time, just because I have that kind of feeling going into it. But yeah, I do appreciate it still as an album. It's just hard.
Yeah, I also had not listened to Pharmacy like at all since doing that video, really. But I mean, it's still not bad. But
No.
Yeah, so that brings us to this second album. The first thing that caught my eye with this album was that the album cover looked even more like Basement Jaxx's Scars than the first one did.
Oh, yeah. What the heck?
It looks exactly the same.
That's really funny.
Well, yeah.
It's very similar.
There's even a song on this album called "Written in the Scars." I'm like, is this a coincidence?
Okay.
Is this really a coincidence?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. It could have been a coincidence. Yeah, but that's really funny.
Yeah, I have a feeling they were probably influenced by Basement Jaxx in some way. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't really have much of any expectations. I didn't have super high expectations, but. Yeah, it did look like it was going to be a bit more varied than the first time, so how did it turn out for you?
I don't even know like where to start when it comes to this album. Obviously, I think the first single that was released off of this thing was No Money. And for one, about that song, like I didn't have any huge problems with it. It was Galantis going into kind of that tropical house sound for the first time, and I was okay with it. The thing about this song is it makes a really god-awful closer for the album, like, at least in my opinion. Like, typically, I would have much preferred a song like Pillow Fight, which has a little bit more of kind of an emotional variable to it, than No Money, kind of closing on the really, like, bright, poppy, happy note that it does.
I actually didn't have any problem with No Money as a closer.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I just thought that track, even though it is kind of dumb, but I mean, I just thought it sounded really good. It just ended on a satisfying note, I guess.
Okay.
And just as a side note, I also thought, even though No Money is pretty obviously like an anti-bullying song, when I first heard it, I thought it was like them going back on Runaway You and I. They were like, I'm not gonna run away this time, because last time I did that I ran out of money.
Oh yeah.
Just thought that was funny. But
regarding that song, that's actually funny. I have not connected that song was an anti-bullying song until just now, because when it says "Sorry, I ain't got no money," I'm what I'm thinking is that like a beggar is talking to the character of the song, and they're saying like, no, I don't have no money. But that's funny that you do mention that, because that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
It was like, this time I ain't gonna run away. It's like, wait, were you running away from the... I don't know. But kind of general thoughts on this album. Like, did you think it was decent? Did you think it was bad?
I did think it was better than Pharmacy, I will say that.
Okay.
Yeah, just, there weren't really any super cringeworthy moments on this thing. There really weren't any bad songs on here. Just, I wouldn't say it's a great album by any stretch. There weren't any songs that super blew me away. I mean, I'll be honest, No Money was probably my favorite track on this thing, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, the album's pretty solid, I would say.
Okay.
Like, there are definitely some songs that... I like that they were able to step more out of their comfort zone with this thing. Like, with their trying more, tropical house styles and trap styles, and I heard some Amen breaks in there, here and there. Like, you got a song like Hunter, for example, which is, like, it didn't sound anything like stuff they were doing on Pharmacy, except for the pitch-shifted vocals and all that.
Okay, so one thing I want to ask you when it comes to this album is how like closely did you keep up with the singles, like, as they were releasing, rather than just like album to album?
I was not paying attention at all. I just went into this album with having... all I heard was No Money, but only because Spectrum Pulse covered it on Billboard Breakdown. So I didn't even hear the whole thing. So I basically went in blind, sort of. That's how I like
I'm going to go ahead and say I have a completely different perspective on this album, and I think a lot of that is because I kept up very closely with the singles that were releasing off this, because I didn't know they were going to release another album. I just thought they were putting out singles. The first one, obviously, was No Money, and then we saw them kind of take a more tropical house direction. I think either Pillow Fight or Love on Me was the next one. And those two I didn't really have a major problem with. In fact, Love on Me is by far my favorite song on this album, largely because I feel like it uses like a really awesome kind of disco hook.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorites too, but it was really repetitive too, though. Just singing.
Yeah,
but I do like that. That is one of the more satisfying sounding tracks on here.
And I really liked how when it builds up to like the first drop, it goes into a vocal rather than like some big like happy energetic thing. I really do not like this album at all. Like I think a large part of that is because like so much of the songs that I hear on EDM radio these days are such like dancehall EDM and tropical house influence stuff, and we can largely thank that to the popularity of Kygo and everything. But this album, rather where at least Pharmacy to me felt more like I said earlier in this review, a light in the dark when it came to what music was being released at the time. Now everything on this album sounds so flush with everything else everyone else is doing.
Okay,
I just can't stand it at all. And like even the singles following Pillow Fight and Love on Me, I just couldn't get down with at all. It was like I just found absolutely no interest in them. Obviously Galantis comes back on this album and uses those same kind of pitch shifted vocals that they did on Pharmacy, but in my opinion now we're in a much worse situation because they're taking kind of that generic tropical house dance hall formula and applying it to their music instead of being more inventive. In my opinion, the songs that really stuck out to me were the ones that rather where Pharmacy was kind of drawing back to that piano house style that was popular in like 2008 to 2010. This album, for the most part, is drawing to what's big right now, and then there are some good parts to me where they're kind of going back to more of like a new disco sound. And that's songs like Love on Me and Tell Me You Love Me. Interesting that they're kind of similarly titled. As well as the collaborators on this thing, I didn't feel like were super impressive other than the fact that we do get a couple producer collaborations. We get the Hook and Sling collaboration and Throttle on this one. I thought both those are probably my two favorite tracks on this album. Other than that, the vocalists we get on this album, meanwhile on Pharmacy, we didn't get a bunch of like pop features. Meanwhile, we've got Girls on Boys, which is a collaboration with Roses, who is popular because she did a song with the Chainsmokers.
Right.
We've got Salvage Up All Night, who features Pooh Bear, who is popular for I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure he wrote like a lot of Justin Bieber's lines on his last album.
Yeah, I just knew the guy because he just did a song with Skrillex not too long ago.
Yeah, right. And then we've got Written in the Scars, which has Rabel, who I think has gained most of his popularity off of doing songs with Marshmello and Afrojack.
Oh boy.
So in the back of my mind, I'm seeing like all these features that they're pulling in on vocals are people that really have gained their popularity off of these other people who have kind of founded things. Like I wouldn't say Marshmello is a great artist by any means, but pulling influences from Marshmello and the Chainsmokers and people like that in terms of how they're going to structure the album. And I just couldn't really get into it. Is there any like major positive things you have to say?
Again, the main thing that I liked about this album over Pharmacy was just the fact that it didn't feel like you were listening to the exact same song over and over. Yeah, I will admit I can see where you're coming from. Just they're doing the whole tropical house thing, they're jumping on trends, but I don't know, I think they did fine with those trends. Like, there are some songs that didn't feel like they were like any thing right now. The one that really sticks out to me is Call Me Home. That one had like a drop that sounded more like it was rock influenced, sort of.
Okay. Yeah, I actually did want to talk about that track because I think it's one of the more interesting productions on the album, but then it calls me back to, I think the vocal chop really doesn't fit over the drop at all. I really like the kind of guitar groove that was going on, but I feel like the chop was kind of just thrown over the drop in order to kind of give more of it a radio appeal, because a lot of what we're hearing on EDM radio these days, it kind of has to have a vocal chop to be able to survive. I'd say a lot of the reason I can't really get through this album very easily is because these chops feel so uninspired. Meanwhile, on Pharmacy, we got that formula wasn't really a part of it. Like, you didn't have to have a big like poppy vocal chop over the top in order to make the songs some way decent. And on this album, I feel like they just felt like they had to take that and put it over almost every single track, which
it's just kind of their MO at this point.
Yeah,
well, I will say this thing wasn't fantastic. I will say that there were some tracks that didn't do much for me. The track with Pooh Bear did not stick out. I didn't think Pillow Fight was super impressive either. It was fine, but nothing special. But I think my least favorite track was probably Hello.
Yeah.
The only problem with that, it's not a bad track, but it loses by association, because thing is, whenever I hear this track and I hear the singer, "Hello, can you hear me now?" and then my mind fills in, "Now put your hands in the air for a century," and I really hate that.
Another thing, I was gonna talk about kind of the vocals again earlier, how we're getting more features. On top of that, I can't tell if it's a really good thing or a really bad thing in my mind, because the features that we get, they tend to sing in their normal voices and not have that kind of pitch shifted like the rest of them, so they stick out to me like a sore thumb from the rest of the album, because it's like, oh, this is so different from most of the other stuff, and most of the stuff on Pharmacy as well, because we didn't get, I don't think, any features on that album, either producing or on vocals. But in the back of my mind, I'm unsure whether to think like, oh, this is a really good thing that we're getting more diversity with the vocals, or like I would have maybe liked to see Galantis kind of see what they could do in terms of pitch shifting and kind of editing those vocals and making them sound more interesting than they usually do.
Overall, for me, I think it's better than Pharmacy. It's less cheesy, it's less embarrassing. I like that it has more variety. I think it's solid, but I also don't think I'm going to be coming back to it much. Yeah. And you?
I do largely agree with you on the aspects that it does have more stylistic diversity than Pharmacy, which is definitely a plus. But like I said, just because it's in a situation right now where so many other people are kind of doing the same style, and most of these vocal chops over the top lines of these songs are like more sickness-inducing to me than the repetition of Pharmacy. So at least for me, this album is like, they took No Money and kind of washed that song as much as they could, wash, rinse, and repeat, and then kind of put that back on almost all of the songs on this album. Of course, there are some interesting ones. I think this would have been a much more interesting album to me had they taken a concept with it where they wanted to go back and kind of call back to new disco, to disco music and house music. Because those are the songs I generally prefer on this album, although I did like No Money a lot. But in general, what we're getting is very, to me, undistinguishable from most of the stuff that like DJ Snake and Major Lazer and groups like that are kind of putting out at this point. And like, just because of that, neither of these albums appeal to me a lot in terms of their stylistic diversity. But this album to me appeals less just because it's so samey to everything else I've been hearing lately. Okay. And that's just how it is. Like I just have a really hard time with this one.
Yeah, well, I guess I was going in expecting like Kygo's Cloud 9, just everything being exactly the same. So, and I did not get that. So I'm just, I think it's fine for what it is. So for me, my rating would be, for me, 7.3 out of 10. I think it's good. And for you?
I think for me, for the Aviary, I'm probably feeling like a strong 3.5 out of 10. That's probably the highest I can go for this. Yeah.
Alright, so I guess that's pretty much it. Of course, these are all just our opinions. You can feel free to disagree with it.
Yeah, obviously.
But I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.
See you guys later. Peace.